Hello and welcome to Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. We're very pleased to have as our guest author today, Windsor contemporary romance writer Kate Smoak. Kate has published a series of 4 books, and we're going to discuss the first book of that season's series, titled A Bright Summer. But Kate also has some pretty exciting news to talk about. She's helping to organize Windsor's first annual Rose City Romance Conference at Caesars Windsor in June of 2025. Sounds exciting. Kate, welcome to Scribes and Songsters. So we'll talk about that conference in a little while, because that sounds really tremendous and sounds like a lot of work. So first of all, tell us a little bit about Kate. Where'd you grow up?
I'm from the Chatham-Kent area. I went to school in Windsor for college and kind of moved around Ontario a little bit, but Chatham is home.
So when did you start writing? When did you sort of realize that, you like to write?
I was little when I started writing, like as soon as I could start stringing sentences together. I kind of always wrote stories, little picture books at first, and then it kind of went from there. And then I went to school for journalism and, it's just grown ever since. I'm a bookworm at heart too. Last year I read 126 books. So it's just in me. Yeah.
You need to come and talk to my students about reading.
Yeah.
That's quite a tremendous achievement. But do you find that the more you read, the better writer you become?
Definitely. I've always thought that, and that's kind of why I read. I find like anything I can read is basically research into writing. Mm-hmm. It gives me a different perspective of how I can word things, how I can bring imagery, or even create a new setting altogether.
Mm-hmm. When did you decide I can become a published author? Not just, writing stories for myself and my friends.
Well, it just kind of happened. Honestly, I've always played with manuscripts and writing and everything. And then really what took it off was A Bright Summer. I just kind of sat down and hammered it out in a week, had my first draft.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was really quick. I mean, it took a few months to refine it and then, figure out how to get an editor on my own and figure out the indie publishing world. Mm-hmm. But I sat down one day and it just came to me. I can't even explain it. It just lightning struck.
Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about that indie world, because more and more opportunities have been presented to writers mm-hmm. because of that whole indie world now.
Yeah. So there's a lot of great platforms out there, like obviously Google, but Kindlepreneur mm-hmm. is a really well-known blog that I kind of started from and kind of getting their tips and tricks. And honestly, the indie publishing world is so welcoming. It's not competition or anything like that. Like you ask a question, almost anyone is happy to answer your questions. So really, you just slide into their DMs or whatever, and most of them are happy to talk to you, especially if you're looking at starting writing yourself. But Amazon is really where it hit home for me. Like, getting my feet into the water with publishing myself. Yeah. It really is just that platform that's so accessible for anyone to start that journey.
And it also is a very large platform.
It is. It is. And it's great for people that want to see, even if it's worth it. Like you can mm-hmm. kind of test your genre, test your tropes and everything like that. And people are honest if they like it or not, but it's great because it's a low risk mm-hmm. way to try and enter the market.
Because you don't have to buy 10,000 books.
Right.
It's print on demand.
Correct.
And so you're right. You can judge whether or not, this might be lucrative.
Right. And their platform for ebooks is perfect too. Right. Like, so if you don't have the funds to be able to purchase an actual paperback, you can still be within that world through ebooks. And they make it very accessible for that. And it depends on where you are in the rankings, but you still make money. Like you still can see mm-hmm. that and fund your love of writing. through that as well. So
who were your influencers in term, when you got started?
I read a lot of Colleen Hoover, Elsie Silver, Anna Hong. Like, they're my favorite. More specifically, Anna Hong. She's my absolute favorite. Billionaire romance is my thing. And I love reading it. And Elsie Silver's another fellow Canadian that started as indie publishing as well, which really kind of was like, well, if she can do it, maybe I can do it. Mm-hmm. Right. So it was kind of nice to see that indie publishing is actually huge for the Canadian writers. You see a lot more of us in the indie world.
Yes.
So it's kind of nice to be able to have that connection with them, even indirectly.
So you chose romance. Before I ask you why you chose romance, do you have a very eclectic reading list beyond romance?
I do. Romance is definitely the main genre, but the subgenres in romance really varies.
Oh, yes. Okay. I was going to get to that later, but we might as well. I'd like to talk about it now. I didn't know there were such things.
Yes.
So I made a note of them. Okay. Let me see. The contemporary.
Yes.
Tell me about contemporary.
So contemporary is set within our world. So our time frame, anywhere in between, I would say 21st century, late 21st century till now, all of that kind of the here and now. Mm-hmm. And then you have the historical that's back hundreds of years even. And then
you mentioned billionaire.
So that is a subgenre within either all of the categories, but mostly it falls within contemporary. So there's contemporary and then billionaire contemporary. So it deals with the high lifestyle of the rich and famous and all of that. And usually the trope is the male is the billionaire and the female is the underserved community or the lower social status. And they find that connection.
Was that sort of 50 Shades of Greyish?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. So he was a billionaire. He had all the power and she was the one who's just coming out of school, didn't come from means and stuff like that and finding herself in the world. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the generic trope of the billionaire. But
did 50 Shades sort of spark that billionaire or had it existed?
I would say it kind of really led the path towards it. I'm not sure if it was the one that initially started it, but I think it definitely created the path for that genre for sure. Yeah. It's the one that made it known. Mm-hmm.
It certainly sold a lot.
It did.
And dark. What is dark?
Dark romance. Oh, it's taboo stuff. It's not quite thriller. It's not quite horror, but it's dark, morally gray. It's not even mafia. Mafia is its own genre as well. But
mafia it has romance.
Yeah, mafia romance is hot. Let me tell you. But dark romance kind of deals with those darker topics. So it could have abuse in it, domestic abuse, or even it deals with sex trafficking and stuff like dark topics, right within that world. And then it more has morally gray heroes,
right?
Which would be men not afraid to kill if needed, or they're the ones running the sex trafficking ring, or stuff like that. Yeah. So it has a very darker tone to that subgenre. And there's lots of triggers involved in those genres, especially too. So you'll get domestic abuse, you'll get alcohol, substance abuse, and you'll get murder. Sometimes there was one and it was cannibalism and it gets very dark. Yeah.
I wonder how easy it is to write a romance around cannibalism.
I mean, I've seen it done.
No kidding.
It's a little weird, but they did it well. I mean, it's definitely not my cup of tea, but it was done well. And I read a little bit of everything to broaden my horizons.
You got to know what's out there.
Exactly.
Now, paranormal romance.
Paranormal romance is like ghosts, spirits, from the beyond, sort of supernatural. So like you can have witches and vampires and stuff fall into that genre.
Yeah.
They do have their own subgenre, but paranormal kind of covers a lot of that all together under one category.
Later in life.
Later in life are the ones, not necessarily men, but the women who are, quote, past their prime. So like after a divorce, like 20 years down the line, like she's had her kids, they're all grown up. So those are the kind of women that we would see in those novels, would be later in their life, retired even older sometimes.
Fascinating. Now there's one, is it
Romantasy? Romantasy. It is just a hybrid of fantasy and romance, where the plot is almost 50-50 romance, 50-50 fantasy. So fantasy romance is kind of its own, where it's more fantasy and the subplot is somewhat romance, but romantasy is more 50-50 across the board.
What attracted you to romance?
Honestly, I never thought I'd be a romance writer. I used to make fun of my mom for reading romance novels when I was younger. I was very into like fantasy or like just regular, generic fiction. And as I got older, my taste changed. And then I started reading romance and I was like, I could do that. I could definitely do that. And romance is just, I like the feelings that you can put into it. I like the connections you can have with the characters, and specifically contemporary, because I'm not great at world building. That's one of the skills I need to work on, I'll be honest. And so having those kind of rules already kind of built for me kind of helps me be able to focus on the other aspects of the story.
Now, you have a warning.
Yes, I do. I do have a warning.
So can I read it?
Sure.
Okay, the warning says, this book contains scenes of graphic sexual content, depictions of alcohol and drug use, and deals with mental health issues like anxiety and eating disorders. We advise readers accordingly.
Yes.
How difficult is it to write explicit sex? I mean, is there a writing style guide or something?
I'm not sure. That's a great question. Not for me. I used to write it in public when I worked. Like at work, I'd be on break writing it. My boss would come into the break room. Yeah, right. So I don't know. I know there's lots of great courses out there, and like bloggers and like even authors give tips and tricks, and even editors. But I feel like learning that part of the craft really comes from reading what someone else has done. Right? Like there's lots of ways to put it. You can still be explicit and use flowery words, and finding that balance. But I think it really just goes into the research that you put into it and what you want to write and how you want to write it. Really. There aren't really any rules to that part of the craft.
Is it hard to write?
Yeah. I would say so. I would say so. I mean, sometimes it comes easy for me. Sometimes I'm sitting there mashing my keyboard, frustrated as all get out because it won't come out the right way. And I usually typically find that when I have that struggle, it's something's wrong earlier in the book that's not connecting to my work.
Right.
So I usually have to revisit, not so much edit it, but I go back and reread everything I wrote to find that one point that it's like, that's why it's not connecting.
So has your mom read them?
Yes, she has. My grandmother's read them.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow. How old's your grandmother?
72.
Oh, that's not old.
No, but for her to read it, it's a big thing.
Yes,
so.
No kidding. What'd she think?
She loves them.
Oh, wow.
She does think, obviously, the sexual content is maybe a little too much, but she reads it. She likes it. She's one of my number one supporters. So
that's a good grandma. Okay, so let's go to your story.
Okay.
Tell our audience a little bit about the story itself.
Okay. So A Bright Summer, I specifically wrote it in a Canadian setting because I do find that just fiction in general lacks Canadian settings. They're usually mentioned in passing, or it's like, oh, if it's a hockey kind of theme, yes, Canada's definitely mentioned. But other than that, not so much. And I really wanted that to be kind of my thing, which is kind of important to me. So it is a Canadian setting, and it starts off with this girl who's severely neglected by her family. She actually is a billionaire herself. She's an heiress to a company or a media company. And she's really closed off. And I've kind of taken the trope that's usually within a romance, and I've kind of spun it on its head. And I've made her the one that has the commitment issues, the one that struggles to connect with people, the one that has, family issues, but wants to meet and exceed those expectations from her family that she's never going to quite get. So Alyssa is all of that. And then enters Brant, who is kind of a name for himself. He grew up with middle class a little bit, and he was going to school, dropped out, started his own company, and kind of worked his way up into that billionaire status, kind of within the same stratosphere, now branching into media.
and so you're sort of straddling the billionaire contemporary, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing, is billionaire contemporary. I just think that world is fabulous. Like, there's so many less limitations that you can do with it. I mean, brand names and all of that stuff, but you kind of can really get a little bit more surreal with it, kind of live that vicarously lifestyle of rich and famous through them.
And now the character Brant certainly has sex on his mind.
He does. He's a virgin, actually. I took that virgin trope and gave it to him, which usually isn't the case. So he definitely has sex on his mind. And Alyssa doesn't realize, but he knew her from high school way back when. So he's kind of always known who she was and all of that, but he wasn't even a blip on her radar. And her parents, her father is a piece of work. That's putting it mildly. He is a very big piece of work. And I really don't know what inspired him, other than I really wanted a villain in my story. And he seemed like to be the perfect candidate for that villain.
And there's certainly a twist in the story.
There is. Yeah. There is. So her father is very manipulative, he's very misogynistic. There's very big undertones of misogyny in there. And
it's very 1800-ish, isn't it?
Yeah. And I kind of gave him the look of even like a mobster, like the chain, the dark hair, the suits and all of that, to kind of really tie into that old school vibe of misogyny. And the only way his daughter would earn a place in his world would be by marrying someone of equal value to who he would seem his equal. Right. So enter a marriage contract, essentially, but she's not allowed to know about it because he knows his daughter will freak out. Commitment issues.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because the end of the first volume was certainly not a Hollywood ending.
No. And that was another thing. I've learned from my mistakes. Being a new author, that's not something you should do. But I had it in my mind that I wanted to take this genre and blow it apart. And when I wrote the first book, I knew it was going to end happy. I knew it was going to leave to a cliffhanger. And I kind of wanted it that way because life isn't happily ever after all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You got to work to get that sometimes, if you ever even get it. So it was important to me to make it a bit more realistic in ways where it would resonate with some people, even if they don't experience their fathers forcing them into a marriage.
Yes.
You know? So I really wanted to make it realistic in certain ways that people could resonate with.
Well, you certainly set it up. The way it ended, it certainly set it up to continue.
Yes.
Well, that was clever.
Well, thank you.
And so now you've written all 3 other volumes.
I have. Yes.
So what are we going to expect in volume 2?
Volume 2 is Brant getting over heartbreak and, attempting to get over heartbreak, and Alyssa just passing time trying to figure out what to happen, or how to deal with what's happened, I should say. And Riley, which is another thing that I did differently in my books, is I have a third POV.
Yes, you do.
And Riley comes into her own in the second and third book. She really takes shape, and she's actually really near and dear to my heart. I love her. It was so special being able to write her, because she experiences an eating disorder.
Yep.
And she's struggled with that her whole life. And to be able to navigate that with caution, but also keeping true to that disorder, was something very challenging, but humbling as well. And she really makes a bigger appearance in the next 2 books going forward. So balancing all of their timelines and their interactions really just starts to shape the whole story in the next book. And
let me remind myself, her guy. Reese. Oh, yeah. Couldn't read my writing. So now, I mean, he plays a pretty important role in the first book. Does he continue that?
He does. We start to see him with Riley. We don't get his POV, but we get to see kind of how much of a train wreck he actually is in the books subsequent with Riley. We get to kind of see that he's that kind of playboy, and he's not quite who he kind of pretended to be necessarily.
Yeah, because in the first book, he didn't seem like too bad a guy. I mean, highly sexed.
Yeah, but connected with Riley really well.
Yes.
And they seem to be a perfect match, but we kind of get to see how he handles pressure and the fallout of Alyssa leaving at the end.
Book 2, book 3. I mean, when you write 4 books on a particular subject, you've got to sort of keep kind of adding characters. Do you add characters?
No.
Wow.
It just follows Alyssa, Brant, and Riley, and it actually wraps up their story. It wraps up their story arc. I was kind of wrestling with it if I should drag it out another book to make the whole series full with the 4 seasons. But that felt really cheap, especially to my readers. Like, I couldn't drag the story on any longer. We kind of hit that pivotal point where just let them all be and finally be happy.
The end of book 4, is there a little bit of a Hollywood ending?
Book 4, happily ever after, guaranteed.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm sure romance writers would be very glad to hear that.
Yes. You even get a sneak peek at the next series at the end of the book 4.
Oh, and what's that?
It is, so the side characters in the book 4 launch the next series. So so all of my series so far are going to be an interconnected standalone with the next series. Yeah.
Which character did you really like?
Lexi in book 4.
Oh.
Yeah, I really liked Riley. Writing her, like I said, was really special. But Lexi was just fun to write because she's coming back into a relationship after a breakup and kind of navigating that. But also, she's also the take no crap kind of girl. And she lets her insecurities really bring her down, which was never an issue coming from this confident person. And this person destroyed her heart, but she soon realizes that she was in love with the idea of love with that person and then finds this guy.
Are you having fun?
I am. I live and breathe this stuff. This is me. This is who I am.
Okay, so where can people get your books?
They can get them at Amazon. I do have a website with them, and on the website they can get them signed. Turns and Tales in Chatham carries copies, and Select Indigo and Chapters across Ontario carries them as well. And then there's some other indie indie bookstores across Canada that cover them as well. Like I have a few out in like Vancouver and one in Nova Scotia, I think, that carries them as well.
That's terrific. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you
for coming and telling us all about it, and good luck. Oh, your conference. When is it?
It is.
Okay. Very quickly.
Okay. June 20th to the 22nd at Caesars Windsor. I have about 64 authors going. It's a 3-day event. The first day, the Friday, is actually a workshop day for the authors. So professionals in the industry are going to come and have a workshop day with them. They can get some tips and pointers. It's also open to aspiring authors, so they can grab tickets and enjoy that day as well.
How much?
So it's $55 for an author VIP ticket. So, and that gets you into the Friday all day workshop with the VIP night. So that comes with like, you get to come in, relax, have some hors d'oeuvres and drinks and mingle with like the authors and the other professionals. And then Saturday, is $10 at the door for the book fair part. So you come in, meet the authors, sign books, get your book signed, I should say. And there's going to be a door prize. And there's a VIP access to that as well. So you get early access to it. Sorry.
No,
okay.
Great. And so is that on your website, all the details?
It's not on my website. There's actually a website called rosecityromance.ca with all of that information. And we're also having a fantasy ball on the Saturday night.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you again.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. And on that note, that's it for another edition of Scribes and Songsters. Many thanks to our guest, Kate Smoak. Thanks to our Scribes and Songsters team, producer Brian Sweet and technical producer and editor Gary Glass. Grateful thanks to Tony Toldo and the Toldo Foundation, and to Neil and Tina Queering for their support. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you soon, right back here on Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Bye for now.